The Battle of the Coral Sea, fought during 4–8 May 1942, was a major naval battle in the Pacific theater of World War II between the Imperial Japanese Navy and naval and air forces from the United States and Australia. The battle was the first action in which aircraft carriers engaged each other, as well as the first in which neither side's ships sighted or fired directly upon the other. In an attempt to strengthen the defensive positioning for their empire in the South Pacific, Japanese forces decided to invade and occupy Port Moresby in New Guinea and Tulungi in the southeastern Solomon Islands. The plan to accomplish this, called Operation Mo, involved several major units of Japan's combined fleet, including 2 fleet carriers and a light carrier to provide air cover for the invasion fleets. Under the overall command of Japanese Admiral Shigeyoshi Inoue, the U.S. learned of the Japanese plan through signals intelligence and sent 2 United States Navy carrier task forces and a joint Australian-American cruiser force, under the overall command of American Admiral Frank J. Fletcher, to oppose the Japanese offensive. On 3–4 May, Japanese forces successfully invaded and occupied Tulungi, although several of their supporting warships were surprised and sunk or damaged by aircraft from the U.S. fleet carrier Yorktown. Now aware of the presence of U.S. carriers in the area, the Japanese fleet carriers advanced towards the Coral Sea with the intention of finding and destroying the Allied naval forces. Beginning on 7 May, the carrier forces from the two sides exchanged airstrikes over 2 consecutive days. The first day, the U.S. sank the Japanese light carrier Shoho, while the Japanese sank a U.S. destroyer and heavily damaged a fleet oiler. The next day, the Japanese fleet carrier Shokaku was heavily damaged, the U.S. fleet carrier Lexington was critically damaged, and the Yorktown was damaged, with both sides having suffered heavy losses in aircraft and carriers damaged or sunk. The two fleets disengaged and retired from the battle area. Because of the loss of carrier air cover, Inoue recalled the Port Moresby invasion fleet, intending to try again later. Although a tactical victory for the Japanese in terms of ships sunk, the battle would prove to be a strategic victory for the Allies for several reasons. The battle marked the first time since the start of the war that a major Japanese advance had been checked by the Allies. More importantly, the Japanese fleet carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku, one damaged and the other with a depleted aircraft complement, were unable to participate in the Battle of Midway, which took place the following month, ensuring a rough parity in aircraft between the two adversaries and contributing significantly to the U.S. victory in that battle. The severe losses in carriers at Midway prevented the Japanese from re-attempting to invade Port Moresby from the ocean. 2 months later, the Allies took advantage of Japan's resulting strategic vulnerability in the South Pacific and launched the Guadalcanal campaign that, along with the New Guinea campaign, eventually broke Japanese defenses in the South Pacific and was a significant contributing factor to Japan's ultimate defeat in World War II. Background: Japanese expansion. On 7 December 1941, using aircraft carriers, Japan attacked the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack destroyed or crippled most of the U.S. Pacific Fleet's battleships and brought the United States into the war. In launching this war, Japanese leaders sought to neutralize the American fleet, seize possessions rich in natural resources, and obtain strategic military bases to defend their far-flung empire. At the same time that they were attacking Pearl Harbor, the Japanese attacked Malaya, causing Britain, Australia, and New Zealand to join the United States as allies in the war against Japan. In the words of the Imperial Japanese Navy Combined Fleet, Secret Order No. 1, dated 1 November 1941, the goals of the initial Japanese campaigns in the impending war were to British and American strength from the Netherlands, Indies and the Philippines, to establish a policy of autonomous self-sufficiency and economic independence. To support these goals, during the first few months of 1942, besides Malaya, Japanese forces attacked and successfully took control of the Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, the Netherlands, East Indies, Wake Island, New Britain, the Gilbert Islands, and Guam, while inflicting heavy losses on opposing Allied land, naval, and air forces. Japan planned to use these conquered territories to establish a perimeter defense for its empire, from which it expected to employ attritional tactics to defeat or exhaust any Allied counterattacks. Shortly after the war began, Japan's Naval General Staff recommended an invasion of northern Australia to prevent Australia from being used as a base to threaten Japan's perimeter defenses in the South Pacific. The Imperial Japanese Army, however, rejected the recommendation, stating that it did not have the forces or shipping capacity available to conduct such an operation. At the same time, Vice Admiral Shigeyoshi Inoue, commander of the IJN's 4th Fleet, which consisted of most of the naval units in the South Pacific area, advocated the occupation of Tulungi in the southeastern Solomon Islands and Port Moresby in New Guinea, which would put northern Australia within range of Japanese land-based aircraft. Inoue believed the capture and control of these locations would provide greater security and defensive depth for the major Japanese base at Rabaul, New Britain. The Navy's General Staff and the IJA accepted Inoue's proposal and promoted further operations, using these locations as supporting bases, to seize New Caledonia, Fiji, and Samoa, and thereby cut the supply and communication lines between Australia and the United States. In April 1942, the Army and Navy developed a plan that was titled Operation Mo. The plan called for Port Moresby to be invaded from the ocean and secured by the 10th of May. The plan also included the seizure of Tulungi on 2 to 3 May, where the Navy would establish a seaplane base for potential air operations against Allied territories and forces in the South Pacific, and to provide a base for reconnaissance aircraft. Upon the completion of Mo, the Navy planned to initiate Operation Rai, using ships released from the Mo operation, to seize Nauru and Ocean Island for their phosphate deposits on the 15th of May. Further operations against Fiji, Samoa and New Caledonia were to be planned once the Mo and Rai operations were completed. Because of a damaging air attack by Allied land and carrier-based aircraft on Japanese naval forces invading the Les Salamaua area in New Guinea in March, Inoue requested the combined fleet to send carriers to provide air cover for the Mo forces. Inoue was especially worried about Allied bombers stationed at air bases in Townsville and Cooktown, Australia, beyond the range of his own bombers located at Rabaul and Lae. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of Japan's combined fleet, was concurrently planning an operation for June that he hoped would lure the U.S. Navy's carriers, none of which were damaged in the Pearl Harbor attack, into a decisive showdown with his fleet in the Central Pacific near Midway Atoll. In the meantime, however, Yamamoto detached some of his large warships, including 2 fleet carriers, a light carrier, a cruiser division, and 2 destroyer divisions, to support Mo, and placed Inoue in charge of the naval portion of the Mo operation. Allied response unknown to the Japanese. The U.S. Navy, led by the Communication Security Section of the Office of Naval Communications, had for several years enjoyed some success with penetrating Japanese communication ciphers and codes. By March 1942, the U.S. was able to decipher up to 15% of the IJN's RO or Naval Codebook D code, which was used by the IJN for approximately half of its communications. By the end of April, the Americans were reading up to 85% of the signals broadcast in the RO code. In March 1942, the U.S. first noticed mention of the Mo operation in intercepted messages. On 5 April, the Americans intercepted an IJN message directing a carrier and other large warships to proceed to Inouye's area of operations. On 13 April, the British deciphered an IJN message informing Inouye that the 5th Carrier Division, consisting of the fleet carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku, was en route to his command from Formosa via the main IJN base at Truk. The British passed the message to the Americans, along with their conclusion that Port Moresby was the likely target of MO. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the new commander of Allied forces in the Pacific, and his staff discussed the deciphered messages and agreed that the Japanese were likely initiating a major operation in the Southwest Pacific in early May with Port Moresby as the probable target. The Allies regarded Port Moresby as a key base for a planned counter-offensive, under Douglas MacArthur, against Japanese forces in the Southwest Pacific area. Nimitz's staff also concluded that the Japanese operation might include carrier raids on Allied bases in Samoa and at Suva. Nimitz, after consultation with Admiral Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the United States Fleet, decided to contest the Japanese operation by sending all 4 of the Pacific Fleet's available aircraft carriers to the Coral Sea. By 27 April, further signals intelligence confirmed most of the details and targets of the Mo and Rai plans. On 29 April, Nimitz issued orders that sent his 4 carriers and their supporting warships towards the Coral Sea. Task Force 17, commanded by Rear Admiral Fletcher and consisting of the carrier Yorktown, escorted by 3 cruisers and 4 destroyers and supported by a replenishment group of 2 oilers and 2 destroyers, was already in the South Pacific, having departed Tonga-Taboo on 27 April en route to the Coral Sea. TF-11, commanded by Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch and consisting of the carrier Lexington with 2 cruisers and 5 destroyers, was between Fiji and New Caledonia. TF-16, commanded by Vice Admiral William F. Halcyon, including the carriers Enterprise and Hornet, had just returned to Pearl Harbor from the Doolittle raid in the Central Pacific. TF-16 immediately departed but would not reach the South Pacific in time to participate in the battle. Nimitz placed Fletcher in command of Allied naval forces in the South Pacific area until Halsey arrived with TF-16. Although the Coral Sea area was under MacArthur's command, Fletcher and Halsey were directed to continue to report to Nimitz while in the Coral Sea area, not to MacArthur. Based on intercepted radio traffic from TF-16 as it returned to Pearl Harbor, the Japanese assumed that all but one of the U.S. Navy's carriers were in the Central Pacific. The Japanese did not know the location of the remaining carrier, but did not expect an American carrier response to Mo until the operation was well underway.